Sarah Thompson worked at a fancy restaurant in New York City, the kind of place where the tables were always set perfectly. The lights were warm and low, and soft jazz played in the background most nights. She wore a clean black and white uniform, with her name tag pinned to her chest, and she always kept her dark brown hair tied back in a neat ponytail. She was one of those people who worked quietly, moved quickly, and rarely got noticed. But Sarah had something hidden, something no one at the restaurant knew about. She was a pianist, not just someone who had taken a few lessons or played a little as a child. Sarah had once lived and breathed music. She had practiced every day for hours, starting when she was only 5. Her father, who worked in a small music shop in Ohio, had noticed her gift when she tapped out melodies on a toy keyboard. He had bought her an old second-hand piano when she was 7, and from that moment on, music became her world. Her mother, a nurse, would listen to her in the evenings while folding laundry. Her father would sit nearby with closed eyes, smiling, when she played something soft and emotional. Their tiny home had always been filled with music, even if they didn't have much money. But then life changed, as it often does. Her father died in a car accident when she was 16. It crushed her. She had been very close to him, and losing him was like losing a piece of herself. After that, things got harder. Her mother had to work longer hours, and Sarah started working part-time jobs to help pay bills. Music became something she did less and less. The piano gathered dust. She told herself she'd return to it someday, but that day never came. When she turned 20, she left for New York City with big dreams. She thought she would find a job, maybe play in bars or music cafes, or meet people who could help her find a way into the music world. But New York was not a soft place. It was loud, busy, and expensive. Rent was high, and competition was everywhere. People didn't stop to listen or care about dreams. They just kept walking. She found work as a waitress at a high-end restaurant called Vincent's Place. It had elegant decor, velvet chairs, crystal chandeliers, and a baby grand piano in one corner that sat mostly unused except on weekends when a hired pianist came in. Sarah noticed the piano every single day. Sometimes she would touch the smooth edge of it when no one was watching. She wanted to open the lid and press the keys, just once, just to remember how it felt, but she never did. At work, she was known for being dependable. She never came late, never argued, and always smiled politely. Her co-workers liked her, but none of them really knew her. Sarah didn't talk much about herself. She didn't tell anyone that she used to play Beethoven or write her own music. She didn't say that her dream was still quietly alive somewhere inside her, even if it had grown weak. Her evenings were spent taking orders, serving wine, and clearing plates. Her tips helped her pay her rent and send money back to her mother, who had developed heart problems in recent years. Sarah didn't have time for friends or nights out. Her world had become simple and small: work, sleep, worry, repeat. But there was one thing that never went away: music in her head. Every day, some piece of music lived in her mind. She would hum quietly while setting tables. She tapped rhythms on the sides of trays. She remembered how her fingers used to fly across keys, how her whole body felt when she got lost in a melody. The music inside her never completely died. It just waited, hidden behind tired eyes and work shifts. Sometimes, she dreamed of a different life. She imagined someone walking into the restaurant, noticing her, offering her a chance to play again. But dreams like that felt silly. She told herself not to think like that. No one noticed waitresses, especially not ones with old calluses on, their hands and rent due every first of the month. One evening, she stayed late to help clean after a private event. The restaurant had hosted a birthday party for some rich family. The guests were loud and drunk, and the pianist had played until nearly midnight before packing up. After they all left, Sarah picked up wine glasses and wiped down tables. As she passed the piano, she paused and looked at it again. The lid was still open, The keys were right there in front of her. She glanced around. No one was in the main room. The kitchen staff was busy in the back, and the manager had gone to check receipts. Slowly, almost like a thief, Sarah sat down on the piano bench. Her hands hovered over the keys. She touched one. It made a soft, familiar sound. Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed a few more keys, gently. They sounded warm and clean, just like she remembered. Her fingers began to move without thinking. A short phrase, a bit of a song she had made up as a teenager, came out. Just a few bars, but it was enough to make her heart ache. Then she heard footsteps. She quickly stood up, pretending she had only been cleaning near the piano. One of the busboys came out, gave her a curious look, and went back to the kitchen. Sarah returned to wiping tables, her heart racing, not from fear, but from the sudden joy and sadness that had bubbled up all at once. That brief moment at the piano had reminded her how much she missed it, how much of herself she had buried under plates and trays and fake smiles. The next few days, she felt restless. The piano stayed on her mind constantly. She even found herself listening to classical pieces again on her phone during her subway rides. She watched videos of young performers on stage, remembering how once, years ago, she thought that could be her. But she also knew reality. She had bills to pay. She had no connections, no manager, no record, no formal music degree. She was just a waitress in a big city filled with thousands of other dreamers who had already given up. She told herself she was being foolish. Life didn't work like in movies. No one was going to discover her. Not at a restaurant like Vincent's Place. Not while wearing an apron and taking orders. Still, her fingers itched. Then something strange happened that would change everything. One night, just before the weekend rush, the regular pianist called in sick. The manager was stressed. There was a big reservation booked for a VIP client, and they always expected live music. The staff whispered that a billionaire had reserved the private dining room. No one knew who it was, only that he was powerful, moody, and had very high standards. Sarah overheard all of it while folding napkins. When the manager couldn't find a replacement pianist in time, he muttered angrily that they'd have to go, without music for the night. Sarah wanted to speak up, but her voice stayed stuck in her throat. What if she said she could play? What if he laughed at her? What if she wasn't good enough anymore? She said nothing. That evening the restaurant filled with its usual quiet crowd. The VIP section was closed off, but tension buzzed in the air. The manager checked everything twice. Staff moved faster. Sarah stayed focused on her tables, but her heart beat faster every time she passed the piano. It sat silently, like a friend waiting to be remembered. Around 8 p.m., the billionaire arrived. A tall, older man with sharp features, a silver tie, and a cold stare. Leonard Vance. That was his name. Sarah heard it whispered near the kitchen. He was known for being impossible to please. He owned tech companies, newspapers, hotels, too many things to count. And he hated bad music. That was when the moment came. Leonard, annoyed by the silence, looked around and asked loudly, "Is there no pianist tonight?" The manager explained nervously that the usual performer had called in sick. Leonard frowned. "There's a grand piano sitting there like furniture," he said. "Does no one here know how to use it?" No one answered. Then his eyes landed on Sarah. "You," he said suddenly, pointing at her. "You look like you've played before." The whole room seemed to freeze. Sarah's heart dropped. She didn't know how to respond. She opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded slightly. "Good," Leonard said. "Let's hear something. Surprise me." Her manager looked shocked. "Sir, she's a waitress." "She's also standing near a piano," Leonard interrupted. "Let's see if she's more than a tray carrier." Everyone was watching her now. She felt small and exposed, but something in her wouldn't let her say no. She had waited years for a sign, a chance, even if it was ridiculous, even if it came from a grumpy billionaire. She walked slowly to the piano. Her hands trembled as she sat down. The room was too quiet. The keys stared back at her. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers gently on the keys, and for the first time in years, she played. Not a full song, just a few notes. But her fingers remembered more than she thought. They would. She didn't see it yet, but everything in her life was about to change. The silence inside the restaurant felt heavier than usual. Every eye was on Sarah as she sat at the piano bench. Her heart thudded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unsure of what to do. She had dreamed about playing again for years, but she never imagined it would happen like this, with a billionaire demanding a performance in the middle of a dinner shift. Leonard Vance, the billionaire himself, was sitting with three other important-looking people in the private section of the restaurant. He was tall, with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that looked like they could see through people. Sarah could feel his gaze even from across the room. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just waited, expecting her to either play something brilliant or make a fool of herself. Sarah swallowed hard and glanced at her manager. He didn't say anything. No encouragement, no warning. Just a frozen expression of confusion. Maybe he was afraid of losing the restaurant's most powerful client. Maybe he didn't want a waitress embarrassing them in front of billionaires. But he didn't stop her either, so she turned back to the piano. Her fingers touched the keys, and nothing happened. She pressed one key gently, then another. The notes were soft, uncertain, like a child learning to speak. She had forgotten how stiff her fingers could feel when nervous. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to find calm. In the storm building inside her, she thought about home. Her small bedroom back in Ohio with posters of composers on the wall. She remembered her father's voice saying, "You don't have to play like anyone else, sweetheart. Just play like yourself." A deep breath escaped her lips. Then she began to play. It wasn't a famous piece. It wasn't something flashy or dramatic. It was a lullaby. A small, gentle tune her father used to hum when she couldn't sleep. Her fingers remembered it well because it had lived in her heart for years, buried under layers of daily struggle and forgotten dreams. The notes flowed, uncertain at first, then more confidently. The sound drifted into the dining room gentle and emotional. Conversations that had continued in the background slowly faded. Forks and knives paused. Even the waitstaff stopped moving for a moment. Sarah didn't notice. She was too deep inside the music. The tune lasted less than 2 minutes, but something about it was raw and honest. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It came from a place of love, memory, and loss. And for that moment, she wasn't a waitress. She was just a girl who had once lived for music and had finally found her way back to it. When she finished, the room was completely silent. She opened her eyes and saw people staring, not in judgment, but in something else. Surprise, maybe. Curiosity. Even wonder. Leonard Vance leaned back in his chair. His expression didn't soften, but it changed slightly. He tapped one long finger on the table and said, in a low voice, "That wasn't what I expected." Sarah stood slowly, unsure of what to do. Her face burned with heat. She didn't know if he was insulting her or not. The room stayed quiet. No applause, no laughter, just silence. Leonard tilted his head. That wasn't music for a room like this. That was music for someone's soul. Yours, I imagine. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't know how. Then, unexpectedly, Leonard said, "Again." She blinked. "Sir? Play something else. Something that tells me who you really are." Her hands shook slightly. She hadn't played 2 songs back-to-back in years. She felt exposed, like a secret had been torn open, and now everyone was waiting to see more of it. She wanted to run, to go back to wiping tables and pretending none of this ever happened. But she also knew this might never happen again. She sat back down. She thought carefully this time. What could she play that truly showed who she was, not the girl she used to be, not the scared young woman working 2 jobs, but the version of herself that still hoped, still believed, even in quiet moments when no one was watching. A melody formed in her mind. It was something she had written herself, a long time ago. She had never played it for anyone, not even her parents. She had composed it during a cold winter when she was 17, sitting alone by the window, watching snow fall in silence. It didn't have a title. It was just her feelings, turned into music. Melancholy, beauty, pain, and strength all mixed together. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. This time the sound was different, stronger, braver. The notes were fuller, deeper, like her soul was speaking through her fingertips. It wasn't showy or technical. It was emotional. The song climbed and fell like waves in a storm. There were moments of softness, then sudden bursts of power like her heart was arguing with itself and finding peace in between. The restaurant disappeared around her. She forgot the guests, the billionaire, the staff, the chandeliers. She was inside the music completely. She remembered crying while writing this piece. She remembered thinking, maybe no one will ever hear this, but at least it will exist. Now it did. When the last note faded, she stayed still. The room remained silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The air felt heavy with emotion. A few guests looked visibly moved. One woman dabbed at her eyes. A man near the back leaned forward as if trying to understand what he had just heard. Even the clinking of dishes in the kitchen had stopped. Leonard Vance sat completely still. Then he spoke. That, he said, was not the playing of a waitress. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. But his voice was different now. Calmer. Thoughtful. You've hidden that for how long? He asked. Sarah hesitated. Years. He nodded slowly. Why? Because life didn't leave much space for it, she answered honestly. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he stood and straightened his jacket. He turned to the manager and said, "Send me the bill." Then he looked back at Sarah. "You should be doing this. Not this." He gestured around the restaurant. "But this," he said again, motioning to the piano. Sarah didn't know what to say. Leonard turned and left without another word. The moment passed, but the echo of it stayed in the air. That night, when the restaurant closed and the staff gathered in the kitchen to count tips and clean up, no one teased Sarah. No one made jokes. They just looked at her differently, as if they had seen something they didn't expect. Even her manager, who usually kept things all business, quietly said, "That was something else." Sarah walked home alone under the city lights. She didn't feel tired for the first time in weeks. She felt awake, more alive than she had in years. Her mind replayed the music, the silence, the way the room had stopped breathing. She didn't know what would come of it. Maybe nothing. Maybe it was just a strange night. But something had cracked open inside her. The part she had hidden for so long was now out in the open, and it wasn't going back. The next day, something even more unexpected happened. Her manager handed her a note, a simple white envelope with her name on it. Inside was a handwritten message. "If you still believe in that sound, don't waste it. Play like your life depends on it. LV." There was no phone number, no contact information, just a signature, and a message that stirred something deep in her chest. For the rest of her shift, she kept thinking about what he said. Play like your life depends on it. And maybe, just maybe, it did. For the next few days, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She would relive that night in her mind over and over again. The silence before the first note, the way the music flowed from her fingers, the look on everyone's faces when she finished, and most of all, the way Leonard Vance had spoken to her. His words were simple but powerful. "You should be doing this." That sentence kept ringing in her head. She had no idea what he meant exactly. Was it just a compliment? Was it advice? Or was it something more? And that note he left. Play, like your life depends on it. Was that just a poetic way to say she was good? Or was he trying to push her toward something? The truth was, she didn't know. But whatever it was, it had stirred something inside her. Something that had been sleeping for too long. At the restaurant, people began looking at her differently. Some of the waiters who barely spoke to her before now nodded with quiet respect. The hostess, a cheerful girl named Jamie, asked her if she had taken lessons from someone famous. One of the chefs even joked, "Don't forget us when you're on TV." But not everything was light and magical. There was confusion too. Sarah didn't know what to do with this sudden moment. Should she chase her dream again? Should she try to find a piano teacher or perform somewhere? She hadn't played on a stage in years. She didn't even own a piano anymore. All she had was that one strange night and a piece of paper with a billionaire's initials. Still, something inside her had shifted. She started to change small things. She spent less time scrolling on her phone and more time listening to music she loved. She found old videos of classical pianists and watched them for hours after work. She downloaded a cheap piano app on her phone and practiced finger movements during her train rides. It wasn't enough, but it was something. A beginning. She also began saving up to rent a keyboard. Even if it was used and small, she needed to play again. She couldn't keep this part of her locked away anymore. It was like holding her breath for years and finally remembering how to breathe. One rainy afternoon, while she was on her way to work, she stopped in front of a small second-hand music store. She had passed it a dozen times before, but never stepped in. This time, she walked through the door. The shop smelled like old wood and sheet music. Instruments hung from the walls, and soft piano music played from a speaker in the corner. An elderly man behind the counter looked up and smiled. "Looking for something special?" Sarah hesitated. "Just looking. Maybe a keyboard. Something not too expensive." He nodded and led her to a corner where a few used keyboards were stacked. They weren't beautiful or new, but they were clean and in working condition. She ran her fingers over the plastic keys. It wasn't the same as a real piano, but it was close enough. It was a start. She picked the smallest one and asked about the price. It would cost almost all of her tip money for the week, but she didn't care. She bought it, carried it home in the rain, and set it up on a small table in her apartment. When she plugged it in and played the first notes, it was like meeting an old friend again. From that night on, everything changed. Every spare moment she had, she practiced. Before work, after work, on her days off. Her fingers were stiff at first, but they remembered. Slowly, her speed came back. Her touch softened. Her emotions flowed through the keys. It was like waking up a part of herself that had been asleep for too long. Sometimes she played pieces she remembered from her childhood. Sometimes she made up new ones. But always, the music felt real again. She cried more than once, not from sadness, but from relief. It was like she had finally found herself again. But one night, something unexpected happened. She came home from work, tired and soaked from another rainy evening, and found a letter slipped under her apartment door. There was no stamp, no name on the front, just her first name in neat handwriting. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a short note. "I'd like to hear you again. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. The address is below. LV?" She stared at the paper, her mouth dry. Leonard Vance. He had found her. But how? She had never given him her last name. Had he asked the restaurant manager? Looked up their staff records? She didn't know. The address written on the paper was unfamiliar, but it looked real. A street in Manhattan. She searched it online. It was an office building. A tall glass tower. She didn't sleep that night. Her mind was full of questions. Why did he want to see her again? Was it a test? Was it an opportunity? Was it a trap? She had no idea what to wear, what to bring, or even what to expect. Still, she went. The next evening, dressed in her cleanest clothes with trembling hands, she took a train to the address. The building was tall and modern, with a quiet, professional air. She checked in with the front desk and gave her name. The receptionist nodded like she had been expected and handed her a visitor badge. She was guided to the 24th floor, where the elevator doors opened into a wide, elegant room filled with glass, bookshelves, and a grand piano sitting in the center like a jewel. Leonard Vance stood by the window looking out at the city skyline. He turned when she walked in. "You came," he said simply. Sarah nodded. She couldn't trust her voice yet. He gestured to the piano. "I wasn't sure if you would, but I hoped you might." She walked slowly toward the piano. It was beautiful, black, polished, with shining white keys. The kind of piano she had dreamed of playing all her life. Her fingers itched to touch it. "Why did you invite me?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Because I've heard a lot of musicians, and I've heard a lot of noise. But what you played that night, that wasn't noise. That was something real, something rare." Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. She still didn't know what he wanted. "Play something," he said, sitting in a nearby chair. "Whatever you like. No pressure, just be honest." She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. This time, she played something new, a piece she had been working on every night for the past week. It wasn't finished. It had mistakes, but it was hers. Full of everything she had felt since that night in the restaurant. The doubt, the joy, the hope, the fear. She poured it all into the music. When she finished, Leonard didn't speak for a while. Then he stood. "I want to make you an offer," he said finally. Sarah's heart stopped. "I own a small foundation," he continued. "We sponsor young musicians, ones who have talent but no support. We help them get lessons, instruments, performances. Most people never hear of them, but some go on to do big things. I want you to be one of them." Sarah stared at him. "Me?" "Yes, you. You don't have training or a big resume, but you have something they don't. A voice, a story, and I think the world should hear it." Tears filled her eyes. She blinked quickly, trying not to cry in front of him. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," he said, "and we'll take it from there." She nodded, slowly at first, then with more confidence. "Yes," she said. "I want this." Leonard smiled slightly for the first time. "Good. Let's make some noise." When Sarah left the tall glass building that night, her legs felt like jelly. The cool wind brushed against her face, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was spinning, her heart still racing. What had just happened? A billionaire, someone with power and money far beyond anything she had ever imagined, had offered her a chance to return to the one thing she loved most: music. Not as a hobby, but as a life, a future, a purpose. All the way home, she held on to the paper Leonard had given her. It had his assistant's contact, the name of the foundation, and a short sentence written in his neat handwriting. "Let's start next week. You'll be expected." That one line both thrilled and terrified her. She hardly slept that night again. Her fingers kept twitching as if they wanted to play. Her mind kept repeating the melody she had played for Leonard, and her heart kept asking the same question over and over: "Can I really do this?" By morning, doubt had already crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if Leonard changed his mind? What if he had been impressed for a moment, but would regret everything once she truly started? She looked around her tiny apartment, at the second-hand keyboard on the table, and at the cracked ceiling that dripped when it rained. She didn't come from a world of pianos and foundations and art. She came from silence, from lost dreams, from long hours at the restaurant. But then she remembered something Leonard said before she left. You don't have to be like them. You just have to be you. So the next day, she made the call. Leonard's assistant, a polite woman named Clara, sounded pleased to hear from her. Clara explained how the foundation worked. Sarah would meet with a private instructor twice a week. She'd get access to a studio with a real grand piano, and she'd be introduced to others like her, hidden talents who had been given a second chance. They'd cover her costs for a year. All she had to do was show up, work hard, and keep playing like she had something to say. Sarah could hardly believe it. For the first time in years, her life wasn't just about surviving, it was about growing. The first time she walked into the music studio, she almost cried. It was in a quiet part of the city, surrounded by old brick buildings and trees. The studio itself was bright and peaceful, with soft lighting and thick carpets. But the piano, that was the real star. It stood in the center of the room, shiny and elegant, with long black keys that seemed to call out to her. Her new instructor, a kind man named Jonas, welcomed her with a warm smile. He had gentle eyes and moved like someone who had lived with music all his life. "So, Sarah," he said after introductions, "why are you here?" She hesitated. "Because someone believed I should be." Jonas smiled. "Then let's see what he saw in you." The first lesson was hard. Not because she didn't know how to play, but because she didn't know how to believe in herself. Every time she made a mistake, she flinched. Every time she forgot a note, her hands trembled. But Jonas didn't scold her. He watched carefully, listened, and spoke gently. "You've got heart," he said after an hour. "Your technique will come back, but your heart, that's what makes you special." Week after week, Sarah practiced. Sometimes at the studio, sometimes on her tiny keyboard at home. She began waking up with melodies in her head. She'd hum tunes on the train, tap rhythms on the restaurant counters, and scribble musical ideas on the backs of receipts. It was as if her soul had remembered what it meant to be alive. Jonas pushed her, but kindly. He gave her pieces to learn, but also encouraged her to write her own. "You have a story," he said. "Don't hide it. Let it sing." She started writing a full piece, a real one this time, not just a sketch. It was full of emotions she didn't know how to speak out loud. Her loneliness, her losses, her dreams, and that strange night when everything changed. The notes came slowly at first, but once they started flowing, they wouldn't stop. She named it Quiet Light, because that's how she felt. Like something small but steady in a loud world. A few months passed. The restaurant still filled her nights, but her soul no longer felt trapped there. She had a secret now. A world she stepped into during the day, where she wasn't just a waitress, but a musician becoming something real. People at work started noticing. She smiled more. She walked lighter. Even customers made comments like, "You look like someone who just got good news." But not everyone understood. One evening, while wiping tables, one of her co-workers, a young man named Kyle, asked her why she always looked so distracted lately. She told him carefully about the foundation, the music, the lessons. He laughed. "So you're gonna be famous now or something?" "No," she said softly. "Just doing what I love." He shook his head. "It's cute, but let's be real, Sarah. People like us don't get those kinds of dreams. That's for rich kids and prodigies." His words stung more than she wanted to admit. But later that night, she looked at her hands, the same hands that had once silenced a room, and thought, "He's wrong. I've already proven that once." Not long after, Clara called her with unexpected news. "There's going to be a small concert," she said. "An internal one. Just for the foundation supporters and a few close guests. Leonard wants you to play." Sarah froze. "Me? In front of people?" Clara laughed gently. "Yes, but don't worry, it's not a big crowd." And he asked specifically. Said he wanted them to hear what raw talent sounds like. Sarah's stomach flipped. She had imagined this moment in her dreams, but now that it was real, it terrified her. For the next 2 weeks, she practiced harder than ever. Jonas helped her shape her original piece into something polished, but still personal. He guided her through nerves and self-doubt, reminded her that the music was already inside her. All she had to do was trust it. The night of the concert arrived. The hall wasn't huge, but it was elegant, with velvet chairs and soft lights. People in suits and dresses murmured to each other, holding glasses of wine. Sarah stood backstage, her hands cold and shaking. Jonas touched her shoulder. "Don't play for them. Play for yourself, for your past, for the little girl who thought she'd never get here." She nodded, took a breath, and walked out. The lights dimmed. She sat at the piano. Then she played. Every note of quiet light carried a piece of her. The loneliness of working nights while the world slept. The pain of leaving music behind. The joy of rediscovery. The courage it took to believe again. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. She was fully inside the music, and when the final note faded, there was a silence even deeper than the one from the restaurant. Then applause, not wild or loud, but warm and sincere. People stood. Leonard, sitting in the front row, nodded once and clapped with a small smile. Afterward, guests came to speak to her. A woman said she hadn't cried in years, but did during Sarah's piece. A man asked where she had trained. When she told him she hadn't, he looked shocked. Another person offered to connect her with a music group in the city. Sarah stood in the middle of it all, dazed. It felt like a dream, but it wasn't. It was real. That night, Leonard approached her quietly. "You did well," he said. "Now, do it again, and again, and again, until no one forgets your name." Sarah looked at him with wide eyes. "Do you really think I can?" He didn't smile. He simply said, "You already are." As she walked out of the hall that night, the city lights glowed brighter than ever. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She wasn't done. But she had taken the first real step. And something inside her whispered, "This is just the beginning." After the concert, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness inside her chest. For the first time in many years, she felt alive in a way she never had before. But she also knew this was only the beginning, not the end. The path ahead was uncertain, full of challenges and hard work. Yet something inside her was ready to face it all. Leonard's words echoed in her mind. "Do it again, and again, until no one forgets your name." It was a tall order for someone who had just started her journey again. But Sarah didn't want to let him down. More importantly, she didn't want to let herself down. She threw herself into practice with more passion than ever. Every morning before work, she woke up early to play the piano. Every evening after her shifts at the restaurant, she returned to the studio to polish her pieces. Her fingers grew stronger, her mind sharper. She started to understand the music on a deeper level. Not just the notes, but the feelings behind them. Jonas helped her explore different styles, encouraged her to experiment with sounds. Sometimes they stayed late, discussing music's power, to heal, to connect, to change people. Sarah started to write more original songs. Each one told a different story, about hope, about struggle, about dreams that refused to die. Meanwhile, Leonard's foundation began opening doors she never thought possible. They arranged for her to meet famous musicians, attend workshops, and even play in small public events around the city. Each experience was a new lesson, a new step up the ladder, but with every success came new fears. Sarah often felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her. What if she failed in front of an audience? What if she lost the gift she had fought so hard to reclaim? What if she wasn't really meant for this world? There were nights she cried alone in her apartment, overwhelmed by doubt and exhaustion. But then she remembered that first night at the restaurant, when Leonard asked her to play until she silenced the room. That moment had changed everything. It reminded her why she had started, because music was more than sound. It was life. One chilly autumn evening, Sarah received an invitation to perform at a prestigious charity gala organized by the foundation. This event was different. It wasn't just a small gathering of supporters. It was a big stage, with a large audience, media coverage, and important people from around the world. She felt the old fear creeping back. This was bigger than anything she had done before. But she accepted. In the weeks leading up to the gala, she worked harder than ever. She practiced until her fingers ached and her eyes blurred. She prepared a new piece, a powerful emotional composition she called Rising Flame. It told the story of a person who had fallen but refused to stay down, who found light in darkness and strength in vulnerability. On the night of the gala, Sarah stood backstage in a sparkling dress, surrounded by the buzz of excitement. The hall was packed with guests dressed in their finest clothes, the air thick with anticipation. She took deep breaths, trying to calm the storm inside her. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage and sat at the grand piano. The spotlight warmed her face. The room went silent. She closed her eyes and let the music flow. Every note was filled with her journey: pain, hope, courage, and triumph. The audience listened, spellbound. Some had tears in their eyes. Others held their breath, caught in the spell of her sound. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Sarah felt a rush of joy and relief wash over her. She had done it. She had truly arrived. After the performance, Leonard came to congratulate her. "You've become more than I imagined," he said, his voice proud. Sarah smiled, feeling gratitude and determination. She knew the road ahead was still long, but she was ready to walk it over. The following months, Sarah's life transformed in many ways. She recorded her first album with the foundation's support. She gave interviews, sharing her story to inspire others. She played in concerts across the country, and through it all, she stayed humble and focused. But she never forgot where she came from: the small apartment, the restaurant nights, the second-hand keyboard, the doubt, and the silence. Those memories fueled her passion and kept her grounded. One day, she returned to the restaurant, not as a waitress, but as a guest. She played the piano in the corner, where the old upright had been replaced with a new one. The room filled with music, just like that first night, but now her sound was different, stronger, freer, filled with promise. People stopped and listened, their eyes shining with admiration. Some whispered, "That's Sarah, the girl who silenced a room and changed her life." Sarah smiled softly. She knew her story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a life filled with music, hope, and dreams realized. And as she played, she felt the quiet light inside her burn brighter than ever.